Mitra, I was reflecting recently on my experience with shame and how in the past it really ruled my life and I didn't even know about it. It was this subtle thing that was in the background, a dark corner in my mind. And there's so much that I've learned from that journey. So I'd like to open it up by asking you, what are the different ways that shame disguises itself?
Shame is has no shame. Shame really doesn't have shame. It can come in so many shapes and forms, and it can actually fool us. Like a lot of people who call themselves perfectionist and almost are proud of it, they really may be experiencing shame. So perfectionism, people pleasing might be a shame in disguise. Uh, Over busyness, like I'm important and I have a lot of things to do. That may be a cover up for shame. So over busyness, over competitiveness could be that, or sometimes even isolation, not to a healthy degree that we need to charge on ourselves and connect with ourselves, but as a way of escaping and being with people. Isolation can be uh, a sign of shame in disguise. So I really want to invite those of you who are here with us right now to check and see that maybe even though shame as an obvious thing is not your experience, maybe it is shame in disguise that any of these signs that we mentioned might be your experience. So let's dive in. I'm really curious, Ben, because I know you told me that you had gone through a cleansing, shame cleansing experience that was very deep and meaningful and very, very hard. So tell us what you feel comfortable telling us, and then we'll go from there.
For me, you mentioned some of those symptoms, and I resonated with a few of them. The perfectionism, the a tendency to isolate myself, also this experience of a persistent anxiety. Every day was just anxiousness, and that was my baseline. And if someone had told me at that time, though, that, hey, I think you're dealing with some disguised shame, other people call it toxic shame, I would have been like, what are you talking about? I had first become aware of it when my brother gave me a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. When I read that, it really opened me up to a whole world within me that was in a dark corner of my mind and my psyche that in the past I really just wouldn't dare to look at. That's what I was working through, and I'll let you guide this. There's so much I have to say about this, Mitra. So I'll let you guide it with questions, and
Sure.
I can share more about how I journeyed through all of it.
I really liked what you said, the distinction between it, incident related shame and shame as a state of being, which really is the chronic shame. I see it as chronic shame. So, meaning I have so many incidents or so many interpretations, I should really say more accurately, of incident, especially in earlier life and or earlier times in my life, that it has become my state of being. I'm ashamed of who I am. I'm ashamed of where I come from. I'm ashamed of the way I look, and it goes on and on. So shame is my state of being, and I need to cover it up. But let's first start with I want really you to tell me what shame means to you, and then I'll share with you what I believe it means, and that the definition might be very important here. What do you mean by shame, Ben?
Yeah, for me, it's weird. It's always hard to put it into words because it just doesn't make sense when you put it into words. It was like this kind of this feeling of inadequacy, this feeling, this experience of kind of when I would look there an inner hell, and there was no reason that could explain it. It just felt terrible. It was this profound sense of inadequacy, of not being enough, and this feeling that it will always be that way, that I just have to deal with it. And my way to cope with it was to just mask it and disguise it. I really couldn't, Mitra, at that time, I couldn't see a way out of that feeling. I just thought that that's how I was, and I just have to live with it.
Yeah. I think that's very accurate, and thank you for sharing that. I see shame as the idea that I think there's something wrong in general, and then there's something wrong with me in specific. So it's the zooming in and zooming out of something wrong and something wrong with me. And as you said, I'm flawed, like I'm fundamentally flawed. And of course, as soon as I hear that, there are two things I can do. One is to hide it and cover it up. And two, if I'm very action oriented. So in my feminine, in unhealthy feminine, I want to cover it up. In my unhealthy masculine, I want to fix it as if like I'm a refrigerator and needs to be fixed right away. So both of those will show up in different ways. I hear as I'm listening to you, identifying shame is very important because it took you so long. And I know you're very active in that world of knowing yourself and knowing what's going on and learning about yourself. So if it was hard for you to identify it, I wonder how difficult it is for a person that is not even, active in that area or interested even in relating to themselves. How did you identify it?
It started in my early 20s, and I was on this endless mission to try and fix myself, whether that be through therapy, through reading certain books, through doing certain meditations, um, trying all sorts of things. It was this really just this endless mission to try and fix something that I perceived as being wrong with me. And it turned into eventually spiritual escapism as well, where I was using spirituality really as a way to escape that dark corner. And those were some of the traps that I fell into before I was able to see, recognize it, name it, and identify, oh wow, this is what's really happening. And this thing that I thought that needed to be fixed, there's nothing that needs to be fixed. I've experienced it as, when I externalized it, as this software program that I had was installed on me. I need to uninstall it. It's very different than trying to fix something that is wrong.
So I'm
Yeah.
really interested to know, how did you shift from that mindset of fixing, and if people are really into either fixing or covering up, which usually they come together, but one is more obvious than the other one. So if somebody is listening here and saying, oh God, I do those, I can identify with those. Can you help us understand how you shifted from your personal experience, from that mindset to the mindset that was healthier and allowed you some healing to take place?
The shift in the mindset. So the mindset from fixing, wanting to fix.
Or covering
Well,
up in other cases.
the one of the biggest keys was um, a willingness to look, right? To look in that dark corner, right? And there was all sorts of resistance that I experienced with that. There's often the dialogue of like, what's the point of this? Why even open up Pandora's box? This is, my life was fine before I opened this stuff up. This is stupid. I don't need to go there. And so there's these resistances that I had to work through, and developing that willingness was key. And the way I developed that willingness was, it really helped to educate myself on the topic a little bit, not too much, just to understand a little bit what it is, and really to help identify it and name it, so that it's not me, it's this thing that I'm experiencing, but it's not who I am. I took inventory of, how is this affecting my life? How are my relationships? Am I happy in my relationships with my friends, with my family? I noticed that no, they're not that great. At work, what's my relationship with work and my creativity? Unfulfilled, unsatisfying. I was recognizing that there is a possibility for me to have better quality relationships, live a better quality life, pursue my profession in a way that brings me more joy, and that this thing that I was avoiding wanting to look at was the reason why. I was being held back in all of these different ways. So that really helped me develop the willingness to start looking. And that whole process, when I started looking, I mean, there's so much that comes up, and that whole process can become really, really challenging. And there were a number of challenges that I was faced with, and a number of traps that I fell into as well.
What were the potential traps? Oh, not potential, actual traps. And what are the potential traps? If I'm listening and I'm thinking, yeah, I can relate to that. And I can see that this may be shame in disguise, something I have covered up. Can you help us with shedding some light on that?
Yeah. The mindset is so important. And what do I mean by that? So, for example, I brought up this whole idea that there's nothing to fix. This is super important because the whole mindset of trying to fix something that is wrong is inherently false. There's nothing wrong with the individual. All that has happened is that there were misperceptions that one has developed about themselves, about others, about their relationship to others. These misperceptions are a result of misunderstandings and that happen at various points in our lives. And there's nothing to actually fix. Gentleness was really, really important as well. So in the beginning, I had a tendency to I have this alpha masculine kind of get things done approach. And that really backfired on me. I kept being reminded that gentleness is so important. This is not something that I rush through. This is something I take my time with. It's like peeling the layers of an onion. The more gentle I was with myself, the more things would open up and reveal themselves, and the more clarity that would come through. Another mindset that I had was that healing is difficult. No pain, no gain. That you have to earn it. And when I look back in retrospect, that is so not true. Healing can be so much easier, so much easier. And I could see how I almost wanted to experience more difficulty in the process because that was, to me, a signal that I was making progress when in fact I wasn't really making progress. These are some of the mindsets I had to eventually resolve before I can actually start the process of healing. I'm curious, hearing what I've shared, what are your thoughts on that? And do you have any other mindsets that you think that people might benefit from adopting before they really go into this work?
Yeah. Actually, something came to my awareness right now, a memory of working with a person who was extremely successful outwardly. And his story was that I came from no money. And it was a true story and it was a fascinating story. But I noticed because I was doing executive coaching, which means that I was doing a lot of what we call shadowing, like I was with him without speaking. I went, like, spend days to go to different meetings. I even traveled to Europe to just watch him, how he leads his team. And it was very interesting that I noticed that the first story of shame, which he had created shame around coming from a poor background. Even though he spoke about it, I noticed he's over speaking about it. So my question and work with him was, what is this? First of all, this doesn't need to be a shameful story. Me coming from a poor background, there is no need for shame for that. It's great that you made it, but you don't need to make that a story of shame. And then the bigger question was, and you're going to like this, Ben, what this shame story was covering up the shame story that he didn't want to talk about. And when I first brought it up, I said, first of all, this is not a shame story of shame. There's no shame in this. Secondly, I wonder, by overexpressing it and overemphasizing it, what are you covering up? And that opened a huge door to a huge new area. So shame is very tricky. And it could be also a cover up for something deeper, a deeper shame that we're using the like a lighter shame for. Because if I came from a very poor background, I had very little to do with that. It's not my fault that my parents didn't have money. But my question was what other shame was being covered up by this. And we got to a beautiful, and by beautiful, I mean in a sense of that's an overused word, but I mean to a place that he had to surrender and really look at something deeper, which was the shame around the way he had acted in order to make it, whatever that means. I mean, people you say, I made it. And I say, okay, made it to what? Made it to where? But sort of speak of business talk, he made it to the success. He had to sacrifice a lot of human um, relationships and a lot of humanity in him in order to get that. So that was the true shame that he was trying to cover by over um, dramatizing the
Yeah.
initial shame that caused the whole thing. So this became extremely complicated, but also extremely important because I may choose one shame story, go with that, and walk through my life by repeating that story, thinking that I have resolved my shamefulness, but really it has continued in a much, much deeper sense. I'm actually now justifying the behavior that is not very compassionate, that it's
Mhm.
not very even
Mhm.
authentic
Mhm.
and true to my essence by keep telling you, but it's because I came from this and I have to work hard and I working hard means this and I'm justifying a deeper shame that is acting out in me. And the result of that was that he was a person that he didn't like himself. And so all this success, outwardly success, which is very good to have, did not heal the sense of I am not good. There is
Mhm.
something wrong with me and I need to fix myself.
Mhm.
And when you look at that, then you realize that, oops, that's still there, even though I thought I identified a shame, but there may be the shame somewhere that I need to look at.
Wow, you brought up some interesting points. You were referring to integrity, right? Like he was acting
Absolutely.
out of integrity and he was justifying acting out of integrity. Um,
Not acting out of integrity.
yeah, he was not acting out of
Yes,
integrity and he was justifying it because of his story, which was a story
exactly.
tied to like a more superficial type of
Yes,
shame.
yes.
And really, when
And we do that.
and this is, you know, this reminds me of the whole topic of responsibility, right? We're
Yes,
almost like we're exporting responsibility. We're saying it's because of what happened to me that I'm this way,
yes,
and I don't really have control over that, or that it's justified. Responsibility reminds me that that is so key too. That has been really key in the journey. And what do I mean by responsibility? Because responsibility can be misconstrued. I remember when I was first told that I am responsible for what I experienced, there was like this heaviness to it. There was this, what do you mean? You know, I didn't choose the childhood that I had. I didn't choose to be sexually abused when I was a kid. The shift was understanding that responsibility is really just, I am responsible for how I respond to any situation that happens. I am responsible for my inner experience. It doesn't mean that I have a weight, but I like the frame of responsibility that says it's the ability to respond. So, responsibility is the ability to respond to a situation and a willingness to respond out of your own volition as opposed to reactivity. Yeah.
yes. And I think this is what we're talking about is the complexity of shame, really. We're referring to that how complex it can be. For instance, externalizing shame can be done in so many ways. I can say, oh, it was because you did this and you did that that I ended up here or did that. Or it could be that I'm justifying one shame for a deeper shame. It could be in so many ways. And it is important that, as you called it, the mindset, that we don't see it as a fixing, but as an unfolding of ourselves. A shame or any really difficult experience is an invitation to unfolding oneself in a healthier way. I know I'm suffering, and that's the best sign that I know that everything is more difficult than what it should be. When, for instance, one of the signs of shame is being a people pleaser. And when I look around and I see like there are people, and usually we actually criticize them, I see that like everybody is sitting there and they're all enjoying. I'm the only one that feels like she has to do this and she has to do that. But and it's actually promoted by the society. It's just like Mitra is so considerate. She's just so selfless. And it's not true. I need to know where I end and where other people start and where are my boundaries around that. And if I'm not able to see that, then I need to look at where is the shame that I have not healed. So it comes in many shapes and forms. And staying gentle, staying compassionate, staying understanding is very, very important key in order to heal this in ourselves. So it's almost like a, oh, this is a fascinating opportunity for me. There is something, there's an energy that is unhealthy and it's dictating the way I'm showing up with myself and others. Let me learn more about it and bring the good old curiosity around that and allow it to be unfolding of you instead of fixing of you that you're this something wrong with you and you need to be fixed. Yeah.
I can tell you that when I reflect on my experience, there were times when curiosity seemed impossible. It was just so intense. Anytime I tried to put my awareness on that part of me, that sense of inadequacy, and I went into it with curiosity, oftentimes I found myself going into a spiral
Mm.
because I was going into this dark corner of my psyche that I didn't understand, that didn't make any sense. And I would go in at first really confident and curious, but I didn't have the tools to cope with the things that were coming up. And so it would end up almost overtaking me. And I would just go into this downward spiral, this dark hole. Curiosity for me, in and of itself, at that time didn't help because I needed some understanding of what I was dealing with.
And you have a great point here because it may not be helpful on its own, and you may need, and this is the time that you need to seek help. There are professional help, there are group helps, there are books, there anything that is beyond you, and different things work for different people. For instance, the Freudian way of working and visiting the past, it may not be helpful for everybody. A lot of people don't respond to that very well. And there are so many other ways that, people who are almost cultish, and they have their own ways. But I'm curious to know what did work at last for you.
I'd say like the number one thing was getting the mindset right, right? The one was the responsibility. There's nothing to fix. Gentleness was key. The why is not important. So going into the past and understanding my childhood, yes, it's helpful to an extent to understand some of the childhood experiences that led to what I was experiencing. It was not critical for me to understand all the nuances and the details to heal. I found I got the most help from somatic therapy, the nonverbal type of therapy. Any sort of verbal therapy just didn't work for me. I couldn't. The moment I would start to talk about it or go into the past, I would feel a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension. And I tried for many years actually, talk therapy, and it just didn't do it for me. But somatic work was great because I was now just focus on feeling in the body. That's what somatic work is, by the way. To the listeners who might have not heard that before, it's really the type of therapy that's focused on physical sensations in the body and how they manifest. feeling the emotions and allowing myself to move through those emotions, and then being equipped with tools on how to navigate that. And I remember in the beginning when I started doing some of that work, it was weird because it was like magic for me. Difficult emotions that I previously had such a hard time working through, it would take maybe weeks to work through. Literally in one session, I was able to move through things. So it was really powerful work for me, and that helped me a lot.
So it's important to mention that for those of you who are interested in this work, that there is no one way. There are many ways. It may be through the body work and sensations of the body. Some may do dream work, the more of a Jungian work. I know in our group, like the course, the longer course that I teach, that we do a lot of self-coaching around that. And what we do is we actually create an avatar of ourselves. And we look at this avatar from physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual throughout the work. And then we create that and we allow that avatar of us to be our mentor, to be our anchor and point of reference. So when I am aware that I'm acting out of my shame, what I do is I actually refer to that and I say, what would the attentionist Mitra say or do? So I connect to an inner wisdom that exists already within me. So that's a much, I think, higher level of work, but there is no one way that is better or worse. The main thing is that you look at it and you see that there are many, especially these days. I mean, when I was your age, Ben, there were just one option, and that one option had a bad name. Only crazy people went to therapy. But right now, there are so many options available and you can find them on search and it's not that difficult to find. The main thing is to see that if you're ready to seek help. And I think that is the main question. Otherwise, help is never short in this world of many, many diverse options.
You mentioned having an avatar that's something that some version of ourself that reminds us of who we really are. And that reminded me of how important it was for me through the process to have some sort of anchor point, some sort of thing that continuously reminded me of who I really am. Because as I would go into these darker places within my psyche, sometimes it's easy to forget, right? And it's easy to get overwhelmed by emotion. So for me, it was really helpful to have an anchor point. And for me, what that was oftentimes listening to or reading high vibration text anchored in truth and just remind me of who I am. The stuff that had me doing things that was very like action oriented. You need to meditate X amount of times, or you need to be visualizing yourself continually. That type of work didn't work for me. It was the more passive stuff. So I would listen to things like the Tao Te Ching. I would listen to verses of the Bible. I love to listen to A Course in Miracles. And David R. Hawkins has some great work where he talks about love as our essence and peace as our essence. And for me, these things really just kept reminding me of who I really am, so that when I was going through those difficult emotions and it's easy to get into the spiral of shame, having those anchor points helped kind of, it was like a buoy. Yeah, I would say that having an anchor is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no one way that works for everyone. I really invite everyone to just explore what works for them, because when we speak about these inner challenges, and sometimes I hear like, this is what will work. It's just like, no, it depends on what works for you, in what state of life you're in, what access do you have. You know, if I'm in a position that I cannot afford anything, any of these things that people are recommending, then maybe I can access other things and do some different kinds of work. The main point was, one, to identify this hidden shame, because shame comes in many shapes and forms, and it may be hidden and expressed in very different ways. So identifying it was very important. We talked about adjusting our mindset and not see it as like we're broken and we need to be fixed. But that's, this is something that we can unfold and work through and heal from. We're not, things that need to be fixed. And gentleness is what you brought up. That's very important. Taking responsibility was very important, meaning not saying that I was responsible for what happened, but I am responsible for how I can respond to what happened. That's a major distinction, because one brings more shame and and feeling bad about ourselves, that, oh, I must have done something wrong to deserve this. But really understanding responsibility from the sense that I have the power to respond to what has happened in a different way. Then we talked about shedding some light and demystifying basically shame, and not allowing shame. I always say shame is like not shameful. It can do a lot of damage and a lot of harm. So not seeing it as something that it's external, and not seeing that if I'm overwhelmed, there's something wrong. It is very, very common to feel overwhelmed when we open this box of shame, because now we start seeing things that we didn't see. It's like if I turned off the light, I wouldn't know how busy my room is. But when I turn on the light, I see, oh my God, there's things all over the place, and I may feel overwhelmed by it. And then the last thing we talked about was that it was so important to seek help, and whatever way help that may work for you, and whatever help that you may be able to afford financially or time wise, and see that there are a lot of help really available out there. And also, Ben, I wanted to say that we live in a time that there are a lot of free resources available. It is amazing what you can find on common platforms. A lot of teachers on their own websites have a lot of free stuff offering. So start there if everything else is overwhelming for you. Because I remember working with someone that it was very hard for them to even talk about what they have shame around. They had shame around the shame, and it was very complicated. So don't stop unfolding just because it is too early for you to speak about it. You can start by reading a book. You can start by listening to something on YouTube, and start to understand yourself and your shame. So at least the work starts. And then when you feel more comfortable and when you can afford it, then you can seek more professional help and more either one-on-one or group work that might be even more helpful. Great subject, deep subject, difficult subject, but a subject that needs to be talked about and worked on uh, so that we can move forward. So until the next time, thank you, Ben. Thank you for listening, and hope this was helpful for you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. For a list of the links and other resources referenced in this episode, check out the podcast description.
If you're benefiting from our podcast, we'd love if you could help us reach more people by subscribing. Your support means the world to us. From our hearts to yours, we thank you.